Pregnant with twins, she never imagined her life would come to this point. Her eyes, once radiant with joy, now reflected the pain and doubt consuming her heart. The father of her children, the man she trusted, had left without a trace. He abandoned her without explanation, without even a word of goodbye. Her world, once full of promises of happiness, now seemed to crumble. Clara, a strong woman, had always faced life's challenges with courage. However, this betrayal, unexpected and devastating, left her feeling lost. With 2 babies on the way and no support, her mind swirled with questions that found no answers. How would her life be from now on? How would she raise 2 children alone? The insecurity seemed to grow within her like a shadow spreading uncontrollably. It was late at night when, sitting on her worn-out couch, Clara heard her phone vibrate. Hesitant, she looked at the screen, and her heart skipped a beat when she recognized the name. It was him. Carlos Moretti, a millionaire whose reputation preceded him in all social circles. She had briefly met him at a charity event a few months earlier, an encounter that had left a strong, albeit fleeting, impression. Clara remembered that night. He had been polite and interested, unlike other millionaires she had met before. Still, he was a man of power and influence, someone distant from her reality. Why would he be calling now? What could he possibly want from her, a common woman, pregnant and hopeless? Clara's mind filled with questions as her finger hovered over the answer button. She decided to answer the call. "Hello," she said, her voice trembling. On the other end, Carlos responded in his firm and confident tone, "Clara, I need to speak with you. I have an offer that could change your life." Those words echoed in her mind like a distant sound, but loaded with promises. Clara, even scared, couldn't help but wonder what kind of proposal he could offer. Her heart raced. She knew that accepting that invitation, hearing what he had to say, could change everything, for better or worse. The rain pounded against the windows, amplifying the silence that followed. And in that instant, Clara felt the weight of her decision. Meeting Carlos could be risky, but her situation was desperate. She needed answers, a way out. Perhaps that mysterious proposal was her only chance. Initial conflict. Tension hung in the air, thick like the humidity of the rainy night. Clara's mind was in turmoil. Carlos Moretti's unexpected offer had left her uneasy, as if she stood at the edge of a cliff, about to jump into the unknown. What could he want from her? How could this mysterious proposal truly transform her life? Clara was used to relying only on herself, but deep down, she knew she couldn't keep fighting alone, especially with the babies soon to arrive. The conversation with Carlos haunted her. It wasn't what he said that unsettled her most, but the tone of his voice, a mix of authority and mystery. There was something hidden behind his words, something he hadn't fully revealed. Clara could feel it. Her instincts, which had always guided her with precision, were now on high alert. At the same time, the desperate situation she found herself in made it impossible to ignore the offer. With trembling hands, Clara sent a message confirming she would meet him. From that moment on, she knew her life was about to change, but she couldn't predict how far-reaching that change would be. Sitting on the couch, she tried to imagine all the possible scenarios, ranging from an agreement that could offer the financial stability she desperately needed to the darker possibilities her heart hesitated to accept. The tension and uncertainty grew with every passing minute. She felt the duality of emotions taking over her body, fear of the unknown and a timid hope that still resisted within her. Her future, uncertain and fragile, now seemed to depend on that meeting. If you're curious about the proposal that could change Clara's life, don't miss the next chapters of this thrilling story. Subscribe to the channel now and hit the notification bell so you won't miss the upcoming videos. Clara's journey is just beginning. The meeting was scheduled for the next day, in a discreet restaurant, far from the prying eyes of high society. Carlos, always a man of mysteries, chose a secluded place where questions would remain hidden, and answers would only emerge when he wished. Clara dressed in the simplest clothes she had, hiding the belly that revealed her advanced pregnancy. She didn't know what to expect from that dinner, but she was determined to find out what Carlos really wanted. The restaurant was elegant but reserved. The ambience was cozy, the dim lights casting shadows that seemed to dance on the walls. Upon entering, Clara was led to a table in the back. Carlos was already there, waiting for her. When she saw him, his imposing presence seemed to fill the entire space. With a controlled smile and a calculated posture, he invited her to sit. "Clara, I'm glad you accepted my invitation," he said in a tone that mixed kindness with power. She didn't respond immediately, feeling somewhat intimidated by the man in front of her. What did he want? What were his true intentions? I know about your situation, he continued, breaking the silence. You're alone, and soon you'll have 2 children to take care of. I know it won't be easy. Clara felt a lump form in her throat. He was right, but it wasn't something she wanted to hear from someone like him. Carlos was watching her closely, analyzing her every move, every expression. He knew more than he was letting on. I can help you, he said, without hesitation. But in return, I want something from you. The phrase hung in the air, laden with unspoken meanings, each word carefully chosen. Clara remained silent, her heart racing. What could he want from her? The silence between them became almost palpable. Clara, sitting across from Carlos Moretti, felt a complex mix of emotions bubbling inside her. His proposal, still wrapped in mystery, hung in the air like a storm about to break. The restaurant's sophisticated atmosphere contrasted with the turmoil within Clara. She knew that every word spoken in that moment could shape her future, but she had no idea in what direction this would all lead. Carlos kept his impeccable posture, his eyes never leaving hers, as though he were trying to read every thought passing through her mind. What do you want from me? She finally broke the silence, her voice firmer than she had expected. Though fear was present, the pride she had always held onto stopped her from showing any weakness. He took a deep breath before answering, as though he was about to reveal something that required the utmost care. I want you by my side, he began, with a serenity that seemed rehearsed. I know it sounds strange, but I need someone I can trust, someone who understands life's difficulties, and you're that person. Clara narrowed her eyes, trying to decipher his true intentions. Be by your side? What does that mean? Her mind refused to accept that this was the only condition. Nothing in Carlos Moretti's world was ever simple. He leaned forward slightly, closing the distance between them. Clara, you're pregnant with twins, alone. I know this is something you didn't expect, but fate brought us here. I can offer you the stability you need, both financially and emotionally. But for that, I'll need something from you. The tension between them grew with every word. Clara felt a slight shiver run up her spine, but it wasn't just fear, there was something more. Curiosity, maybe even temptation, to hear what he truly had in mind. She had always been an independent woman, but at that moment, the weight of the impending responsibility seemed heavier than ever. You want me to accompany you to events? To pretend to be someone important in your life? She asked, trying to understand the underlying meaning of his proposal. Carlos smiled, but it was a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Not exactly. I don't need a fake wife or a companion for appearances. I need someone to be part of my life, to help me maintain my image as an honorable man, dedicated to family. Someone people can see by my side and believe that I'm trustworthy. I want you and your children to be part of that narrative. Clara felt the weight of his proposal finally start to unfold. He wanted more than a relationship of convenience, he wanted to create an image, an illusion that would help him maintain his social status. However, she knew that Carlos' offer did not come without emotional and moral cost. It was clear that he wasn't looking for a relationship based on love or genuine affection, but on mutual convenience. So, you want me to be your fictitious family? Clara asked, a mix of disbelief and challenge in her voice. In a way, yes, Carlos replied with the bluntness that was characteristic of him. But, Clara, this wouldn't be a completely loveless arrangement for you. Imagine, you would have everything you need to raise your children, financial security, emotional stability. And I would have what I need, an impeccable image, someone the public respects by my side. Carlos' words were tempting, and Clara couldn't deny that. But the doubt persisted in her mind. What kind of life would that really be? Living in a permanent theater, creating an illusion for the outside world while knowing deep down that everything was built on convenience? She thought about the 2 lives growing inside her. Her children deserved more than that, they deserved a home where there was truth, not just a facade of stability. Then I would be your fictional family, Clara said, feeling her voice tremble slightly as she gave voice to the reality of his offer. Carlos remained calm. It's more than that. You wouldn't just be part of a fiction. You'd be part of a reality that many would envy. I know your pride and your independence, but I also know the kind of life you're facing. Alone, with 2 children, struggling for basic needs. Think carefully before rejecting this. Carlos' voice echoed in Clara's mind long after the dinner ended. Back in her small apartment, doubt and hope wrestled within her. What should she do? Accepting Carlos' offer would mean securing a future for her children, something she desperately wanted. But, at the same time, it meant living a lie. A life that, no matter how comfortable, would never be genuine. She spent the night pacing back and forth, her mind weighing the consequences. With each turn she made in the apartment, her thoughts swung between two extremes. On one hand, there was the fear of failing as a mother, of not being able to provide for her children. On the other, there was her aversion to the idea of living a life without love, where her decisions were guided by need and convenience rather than a genuine desire to be with someone. Sitting on the edge of the bed, Clara ran her hands over her belly. She felt the subtle movements of her babies, and it made her smile for a brief moment. There lay the true reason for her anguish, her children. Everything she did, every decision she made, was for them. The life she would give them was now directly connected to that offer, which seemed like the only solution. However, Clara also remembered her own story. She had not come from a wealthy family, but had learned to make her way on her own from an early age. There was something within her that always refused to take the easy way, to tread the most comfortable path without first fighting with her own strength. She didn't want to give up that part of herself, the strength that had always guided her. But, what if she wasn't enough this time? As the morning approached, Clara's mind oscillated between the fear of the unknown and the possibility of a new life that Carlos offered. She found herself questioning her own strength. Yes, she was resilient, but was she ready to raise 2 children alone? Would she be able to give them everything they needed without the help of someone like Carlos? His offer seemed more tempting with each passing minute. It was as if by accepting, she would be signing a contract with security, a contract that, however, came with an emotional price that might be too high. Accepting meant sacrificing parts of her integrity, of her very essence. Living beside Carlos without love, without truth, would be like betraying herself. And then there was her pride. Clara had always been a strong woman, who valued her independence. Accepting Carlos' help, as much as it guaranteed a future for her children, felt like an act of surrender, an admission that she might not be able to do it alone. That thought tormented her, because, as tempting as the proposal was, it involved admitting that maybe she wasn't strong enough to move forward on her own. The decision seemed impossible, and its weight was overwhelming. Clara found herself once again in the restaurant, in the same place where Carlos Moretti had made the proposal that shook all her convictions. But this time, her posture was different. The weight of the decision she had to make hung heavily over her, and the tension in her heart was almost unbearable. She had spent the past few days reflecting, trying to find a way out that didn't involve sacrificing who she was, but the option seemed increasingly limited. Carlos arrived punctually, as always, and his gaze studied her before he even sat at the table. Something was different about Clara today, and he noticed it immediately. "Clara, I'm glad you decided to come. Have you thought about what we discussed?" he asked with rehearsed calm, but his eyes were sharp. He wanted an answer. Clara knew Carlos' patience had limits, though he rarely showed them. She took a deep breath before replying, trying to control the emotion swirling inside her. "Yes, Carlos, I've thought a lot about your proposal," she began, carefully choosing her words. "And I need to be honest with you. What you're offering me is, no doubt, tempting. But there are things that money and security can't buy." Carlos leaned in slightly, his eyes never leaving hers. "What exactly do you mean by that, Clara?" he asked, his tone now slightly more incisive. "You want me to build a life based on a lie, Carlos? A life where we would be a family but only for the eyes of the world. There would be no love, no truth, just convenience. And I don't know if I can live like that," she said, her voice trembling a little as she admitted the truth aloud. Carlos watched her in silence for a moment before speaking, his voice controlled but firm. "Clara, I understand your feelings, but you need to think practically. You're alone, without support, about to give birth to 2 children. Life isn't just about love or lofty ideals. It's about survival, security. And I can offer you that." "I know that, Carlos," Clara replied, now more determined. "And I'm not saying I don't need help. But I also don't want to give up my dignity, my principles. I want my children to grow up knowing that their mother fought, that she stayed true to herself. And that's not something I can easily let go of for comfort." The tension between them grew thicker. Carlos leaned forward even more, his eyes darkening. He was used to controlling situations, shaping circumstances to his will, and didn't like the feeling of losing control. "Clara, you're being naive," he said, almost in a whisper. "The world doesn't work that way. I'm offering you a solution. The best one you'll find. If you refuse, you're putting your children at risk. Is that what you want?" Those words cut deep. Clara knew he was partly right, raising 2 children alone would be incredibly difficult. But the way he manipulated the situation, placing the responsibility directly in her hands, lit a spark of resistance inside her. A flame of defiance she didn't know still existed. "I won't lie, Carlos. Your offer is the easy way out. But I don't want the easy way out. I want a real life, no matter how hard it is. My children deserve that. I deserve that." Carlos reclined in his chair, watching her with a slightly exasperated expression. "Clara, you're making this harder than it needs to be. I'm offering you a life of stability, and you're throwing it away for some foolish idealism. Reality is going to hit you hard when those babies are born." "Maybe," she replied, her voice now firm and controlled. "But I'd rather face that reality than live a comfortable lie. You underestimated me, Carlos. I'm stronger than you think." For a moment, silence settled between them, dense and full of unspoken meanings. Carlos looked at her, as if seeing her in a new light. Clara was challenging him, something few people had the courage to do. And though he was frustrated, he also felt a strange admiration for the strength he saw in her. "You're brave, Clara. Few people would say no to me, especially in your situation," he said with a half-smile, though his eyes remained serious. "But courage doesn't pay the bills, nor does it feed children." Clara let out a heavy sigh, feeling the weight of that emotional battle. She knew she was risking a lot, but there was something non-negotiable within her. "I'd rather fight every day with the difficulties that will come than lose myself in a life that isn't mine, Carlos. That's my choice." Carlos remained silent for a long moment. He was clearly weighing his next words, and when he finally spoke, there was a strange calmness in his voice. "I admire your determination, Clara. But remember this, what you've chosen is much harder than you imagine." She nodded, knowing he was right. But now, more than ever, she was at peace with her decision. "I know it will be hard, Carlos. But I choose to stay true to myself and to my children. They deserve to grow up in a home where there is truth, not just convenience." Carlos looked at her for a long moment, as if considering something. Then, slowly, he stood up, his gaze fixed on hers. "I offered you what I could, Clara. If you ever change your mind, you know where to find me." He extended his hand to her, as though this was the end of a negotiation. Clara looked at his outstretched hand, and for a brief second, considered what she was giving up. But then, with a light sigh, she shook her head. "Thank you, Carlos, but my answer remains the same." He withdrew his hand, nodded, and with one last look at Clara, turned and walked away, leaving her alone at the table. The sound of Carlos' footsteps fading echoed through the quiet restaurant. Clara, now alone, felt a wave of relief and anxiety at the same time. She knew that by saying no, she had chosen the harder path. But as she placed her hand over her belly and felt the gentle movement of her babies, she knew she had made the right decision. Her children deserved a strong mother, not a woman who gave in to the pressures of the world. They deserved someone who would fight for them with everything she had, even if it meant facing monumental challenges. And Clara was ready for that. Night fell again, and Clara, sitting on the edge of her bed, looked out of the small apartment window. The wind blew gently, rustling the curtains and bringing in a fresh breeze that seemed to clear her thoughts. The decision she had made that afternoon weighed on her mind, but not with the regret she feared she would feel. Quite the opposite, choosing to say no to Carlos Moretti and his offer of security was starting to bring her an inner peace. Clara knew the path ahead would be full of challenges. Raising 2 children alone was never her plan, but life, with its unpredictable twists, had placed this reality before her. However, by making that choice, she preserved something priceless, her dignity and authenticity. Her children would grow up knowing that, even in the face of adversity, their mother fought to remain true to her principles, without giving in to the temptation of an easy, yet empty, path. With her eyes closed, Clara reflected on the past few days and the uncertain future that now awaited her. Everything seemed hazy, as if she were about to walk down a road with no end, no map, no guide. But at the same time, she felt a new strength growing inside her. This strength came from the certainty that, although physically alone, her soul was at peace with the decision she had made. She placed her hand on her belly, feeling the gentle movements of her twins. "We're going to be okay," she murmured with a soft smile. Her children had not yet been born, but they already meant everything to her. And somehow, that night brought her the clarity that, with or without Carlos, with or without the comforts he offered, she would find a way. Her life, even with all its uncertainties, now reflected who she truly was, a strong, determined woman, ready to fight for her dreams and her family. Clara's story is a powerful metaphor for the choices we make in moments of great vulnerability. It reminds us that, often, the easy path is not necessarily the right one. In a world where we are often tempted to sacrifice our values in exchange for security or comfort, Clara shows us that there is tremendous power in staying true to who we are, even if that means facing monumental challenges. This narrative touches on a universal theme, the conflict between the need for security and the desire to be authentic. It's a dilemma many face at different moments in life, whether in relationships, work, or personal decisions. What would you do in Clara's place? Would you choose financial and emotional stability, knowing that this choice involved living a life of pretense? Or would you opt to face the difficulties head-on, knowing that every step taken would be genuine, even if harder? Clara's struggle resonates deeply with those who have found themselves in situations where the choices are not simple, where every decision carries a cost. Accepting Carlos' proposal would have guaranteed her and her children a comfortable life, but at what price? Clara's life invites us to reflect on what we truly value, security or authenticity. As you watch or read Clara's story, many of you may be wondering, what if I were in her place? Would you be able to give up security, knowing that the struggle ahead would be immense? Or would fear of the unknown lead you to sacrifice who you really are? These are difficult questions that touch us deeply, revealing who we truly are and what we value most in life. Think of a moment in your own life when you had to make a tough decision, where the easy path was right in front of you, but something inside you pulled you toward the more challenging, yet more truthful, option. What did you do? And how did that choice impact who you are today? Moreover, Clara's story forces us to reflect on power dynamics and influence. Carlos, with his prestigious position, believed he could shape Clara's life based on what he offered. But she teaches us that not all power lies in money or social status. There's a kind of strength that comes from integrity, from the will to stay true to one's own values, and this strength is often underestimated. How many times in our lives have we felt pressured to give in to the power of others? And how many times have we asked ourselves if we are being true to ourselves by doing so? Clara's decision to forge her own path, even in the face of adversity, is an inspiring example of courage. It's easy to lose ourselves in a world that places so much value on material success and external security, but Clara shows us that there is a much deeper and more meaningful kind of success, the success of being who we really are, of living in line with our values, and of building a life that, though full of challenges, is genuine. So, the question for all of us is, what is the price of your inner peace? Would you be willing to sacrifice comfort for it, or would the fear of uncertainties make you give up on who you truly are?